Good afternoon, John. Another
Hello.
glorious day, another opportunity for us to share some of the power of the accountability practice, the commitment to intentional living. And as I've been, and we've been reviewing some of the things that we've shared over the previous podcasts, we have recognized it's always powerful to go back to basics and look at things afresh. So what we'd like to do today is address somebody who may be hearing us for the very first time, and like to share with that person a little bit about what it is we're doing here. What's this accountability practice? Why do we do this at all? What is our goal? And in order to get into that, I thought it might be a good opening question to ask you. What was the inspiration or the genesis of figuring all this stuff out? Because it took you some time to figure it out, but something happened that put you on this path. Maybe you could share a little bit about that.
I can. In 1988, I lost everything that I thought was of value, and not speaking, of course, of my wife and kids, separating from them, but also what I contributed to them was somehow just like seen as not the end goal. Me working 24/7, providing for the family, buying a home, all that stuff wasn't enough. It just wasn't filling, and I was struggling with alcoholism, and my willingness to simply be in the relationship anyway. I wanted out, and the only way I knew how to get out was make it her fault, which left me alone, isolated, wondering what the last 39 years meant. And I wanted relief. I wanted to something, and it wasn't something I could really put my finger on. It wasn't like as conscious as I'm calling it now. In retrospect, I found myself gravitating towards a person that I knew that was sober, and asking him what I need something, and I don't even know really what I asked him. And his suggestion was for me to go to a 12-step meeting, which didn't make any sense to me whatsoever. And
let me ask a quick question about that. Is that because you'd heard of it before and it didn't make sense, or it was just a foreign concept, period?
I've heard of AA, and I was still drinking at the time, and I didn't want to quit. I wanted to drink just enough so I wouldn't get in any trouble.
Right.
It wasn't my intent to quit drinking, and yet my life was in shambles. So he suggested this 12-step meeting, and I just found myself there. And when I heard them read the problem, in ACA they read the problem, the solution, and the 12 steps and the 12 traditions. But when they read the problem, that was the first thing you read. They nailed where I was at. Fear of authority figures, isolated, alone, having trouble committing to long-term, loving, nurturing relationships. And there was something in what I heard that shifted something internally. I didn't really understand. I don't remember myself thinking anything really other than I'm coming back. I'm going to come back. And that turned into a 32-year journey of discovery of what made me tick. The questions I ask people to get an idea of what we're working with is, have you ever hurt somebody you love, regretted it, and then did it again, usually in the same way. And that was, I was able to identify that that was me. That's what I did, even though I didn't want to do whatever the action, or for me, mostly it was drinking and or some kind of what I used to call arguments or conflict, which I now know is emotional verbal violence towards my partner coming from me. And it was more of a feeling thing rather than a, oh my God, I found the answer, they're going to give it to me. So the people I work with are also in some kind of distress or confusion. And they gravitate towards some kind of assistance or information. So that's how I started. And this awareness that I have, this information I have, came in increments.
Right.
And what I found out was that based on my childhood experience, we can call it trauma. A lot of people shy away from the word trauma, like it's a stigmatized word, or even abuse. Dysfunction is less stigmatized, although still has some stigmatization to it. I don't know, I want to call it some kind of minor miracle that I found myself with people who were looking for the same thing I was looking for, and none of us really knew what that was, other than something. There was it was more of a feeling tone than a cognitive recognition. So when I do my groups or my classes, that's what I try to recreate from the basic information. And the basic information for anybody coming into my group is, what do you want that you don't have? Most of the people coming into my group are looking for sobriety. And the amount of people who can maintain sobriety for 5 years or more, for the people who have trouble with drinking and using, is a very low percentage. So there's something in the compulsion addiction that is difficult to get information in that seems usable at first. It would be to me, you know, and I see it happening with the new people coming into my group. It's like I ask them what they want, and for the most part, they don't really know how to answer that. And yet what I found in my journey is that it's really important that I know what I want cognitively, because that shifts my focus to things I would normally look at. It sets up this behavior pattern. Focus is important. I don't want to get too far into that part of it. Looking for something, and I want to offer, you may not know, some people call me with relationship issues, marriage is falling apart, I need help. And they're looking for me to give them answers. And whatever answer I got usually isn't recognizable by them as something they want to do. So the material sorts out over a period of time, a period of experiences that, oh my God, I don't know what I want. And then everything I got right here is a result of me not knowing what I want. Oh my God, let's figure out what I want. And that's where the material comes in. So
I have to tell you a story, see if you appreciate this. So you might recall a number of years ago, you went back to Detroit and you visited with Reverend Jim Lee at
Yeah.
Renaissance Unity there, and you met my dad.
Yeah, I did.
And
I
you
did.
did a
Yeah.
men's meeting, and so my dad's telling me about his experience in this meeting weeks later, and he goes, and John kept asking people, "What do we want?" Well, if I knew what the hell I wanted, I wouldn't be at that meeting.
There you go. Yeah.
And what I didn't get at the time, because I was fairly new to all the work too, is that that question is the most important question that we can possibly ask.
Yes.
And that the resistance that my dad was actually angry that you were asking this question that he was not prepared to answer, as if that was your fault.
Yeah.
Because he couldn't identify yet his own resistance to it. And
right.
you know what the work here is all about uncovering these hidden dynamics. You know, you call them belief systems, but these are thought systems that are actually anchored in an emotional structure that
Yes.
can't think for itself. It's not even rational.
Right.
Which is partly why it's so difficult for me to change, even if I rationally think I'm never going to do that behavior again, and I find myself doing it again.
Right. It's a belief that's hooked into the emotions. I like the way you put that. And it's not rational, and yet it is powerful, a powerful manifester. It simply manifests the conditioning we've had throughout our childhood, early childhood, teen years, and young adult life into a belief system that is the driving force for the results that we have in our life. And then people in that try to do good or succeed or do what they're supposed to do. And for the most part, I don't know what the percentage is. I can speak for me. That was empty. That had no substance to it. I had no place to belong. I had no feeling of influence, of power. Everything was happening to me. Oh my God, it's like everybody's against me. And that became my reality. And going to get help, which I found it in the 12-step meeting, put a wrench into that. And it just stopped me in my tracks. And I found myself going to another meeting the next day, and then the next day, and then the next day.
So let's talk about, let's drill down now into the experience, because you said something I think is really important for particularly the new person to appreciate. And that is that even AA, Adults or Alcoholics Anonymous, does not claim a huge success rate.
Right.
And you said after 5 years, the percentage of people who are still sober is relatively low. It's under 50%. And so what happens? You walk into a meeting. I had the exact same experience when I went to my first Adult Children of Alcoholics meeting. I was excited. I was lit up. I could not tell you why. It was, like you said, it was experiential. But something happens. We keep going to meetings. I see this in our own ACA world here. The number of people who are still coming back after a year or two is small as a percentage of the total number of people who come through the doors.
Right.
What happens, and how does the accountability practice address that?
What happens is my experience has created a perception of me in relationship to my community, people, places, and things. That is my safety net. That's where I feel comfortable, where I feel effective, although miserable. So this mechanism is a self-protective mechanism. People talk about it's very difficult to change. They talk about using the word paradigm shift. And the way I've heard paradigm shift was that it takes a major doing to shift a paradigm. Well, the paradigm, the conditioning, has been interpreted by this reticular activating system, brainstem, midbrain, as how I survive. It's not concerned with my happy, joy-free. It's concerned that I survive. And if I'm still alive, even though I'm living in a friend's extra bedroom, it has done its job. And all of that is out of my conscious awareness. We use words like conditioning, patterns of behavior, but we usually use that with people who are exhibiting a very obvious, they got a problem. We put them in jail, put them in the mental institutions, we diagnose them. So we segregate those people into being stigmatized, marginalized, and think they're different than we are. Well, no, they're not. We're all using the same mechanism. Only mine, as far as the majority normal people go, we're on the same page. And I want to offer, we're all struggling with fear, hurting people we love, wondering at it, regretting it, and then doing it again. And yet it's not as severe as the people that either go to jail or get hospitalized, or like me, lose what they thought was of value, everything they've been working for, and all my effort, it just went away. So this mechanism takes this information, creates it's the power that maintains our life, and it's maintaining the life according to the experience I had of everything I survived
in our childhood,
from our preteens, teenage, early 20s.
right?
It's created one way is to put it as a rut. That's a like a remedial way to say it. Patterns of behavior, neural pathways that create habits and patterns. Well, those neural pathways are designed to keep us safe, and they've worked over the last however many years you think we've been on this planet to keep us alive. And it relies basically on the five senses: see, taste, touch, smell, hear. And those five senses alone are what we need to survive. And we've lost contact with our emotional body, and our emotional body allows us to thrive, allows us to have the feelings of meaning, the feelings of accomplishment, the feelings of connectedness. I didn't have those just relying on my five senses. I felt isolated, alone, even with people. Now I feel connected to people, because I've incorporated a thing that people have blocked out most of my life, is the sixth sense. It's like this woo thing. Oh my God, we're going to talk about the sixth sense like it's something sci-fi. Well, what I've discovered is that's who I am as a human being. I have this sense of feeling connected. I'm not getting it from my five senses, which I've been trained in. That's the paradigm. And when I incorporate it, how do I incorporate my emotional body when my focus has been on rational, logical, reasonable, common sense? It's like knowing where to look, even. So me going to the 12-step meetings gave me an experience of this part of myself that I couldn't make sense out of. This just wanted more. This emotional part of me, this knowing part of me, this spiritual part of me got me back to the meetings, in spite of this looks silly, everybody will know I'll be in a 12-step program, they'll think I'm weak. All those things I told myself to stay away from that, and I found myself there. And then over a period of time, it gradually dawned on me, this is what I'm missing. I'm missing the connection to my wholeness. And part of that wholeness is this way to take in information that's not just from the five senses, it's from my emotional feeling body. So I'll stop there.
I was thinking about, how far back into modern history do we go to find systematic attempts to cure addiction? I mean, AA started in the 1930s, if I remember rightly. And, you know, there was the temperance movement before that. We actually, people might not remember, we actually passed a constitutional amendment, I think it was in 1917, outlawing liquor, and the naive belief that if we outlawed liquor, then nobody would drink anymore. And
There's let me, one of the things, I listened to a lot of different things, and one of them was this interpretation of the hieroglyphics that are like cut stone in Egypt.
right,
And they deciphered one of them, and it was take care with the drink. I mean, this has been going on for a while.
exactly.
It's like, yeah,
Yeah. Well, I thought I would avoid trying to go back to prehistory by looking
yeah,
at,
yeah,
well, and it's important because, you
yeah,
know, starting at the end of the 19th century with the expansion of science and the very American ideal of practical application of science. So what can
yeah.
we, particularly
Okay.
medicine, so how do we solve this addiction problem became that became a focus of a lot more people's attention and study. And you had all of these, again, different attempts to find magic cures, you know, ways to help people end the suffering of addiction.
Right.
Now, here we are in 2020, and I think about all of the different programs out there. Some are publicly funded with taxpayer money, some of it is privately funded, and yet we still, there's no evidence whatsoever that the rate of addiction in drugs and alcohol alone, let's not even worry about the more intangible ones like workaholism and sex addiction and all those kinds of things. There's
Right.
no evidence that
Yeah.
the rate of addiction is coming down at all. So from the perspective of
Right.
your discovery, what's missing, and what does accountability offer that's been missing?
Okay. And I want to offer that the rate of addiction is actually going up. Yeah, in the war on drugs, there's more issues in addiction than there was before the war started. Um,
I believe it.
so what I've discovered is addressing drugs and alcohol is the problem because it focuses on the results of this accumulated experience that drives us to these patterns of behavior, habitual drinking, avoidant behaviors. So if this accountability process focuses on the source information for the result, which is addiction, alcoholism, and if you don't address the core issue, the motivating factor for the behavior simply change more, and you go from alcohol to coffee and cigarettes to adrenaline rush with emotional, verbal, and physical violence. Um, if the core issue is not addressed, and I think, Marty, that's what happened when I went to the first 12-step meeting, the first ACA meeting. I felt heard. I felt seen. And it was that imprint, that emotional imprint simply said, come back, go back there. And it wasn't actually a thought. It wasn't a cognitive, realization, I'm going to do this. It was a feeling that motivated me to do something I don't normally do. And the accountability process addresses the core wounding and trauma, wounding, dysfunction, interpretation. Another way to say it is my interpretation of what happened to me. Uh, um, and then the actual accountability tree, tell the truth, the end result of my interpretation of what happened to me as a child. Hold on one second. We had a little break there, but not addressing the source cause, no matter what you do in the behavior itself, in the condition, It simply morphs to some other dilemma, some other problem that is a direct result of the trauma. This mechanism has they call it cunning, baffling, and powerful. It has an infinite ways to keep me in my belief system because it believes that's what's going to keep me safe. That's how I'm going to survive. So it has an infinite different number of ways to get me to focus on, get it right, change this, so change that, don't drink this, don't only drink this kind of booze, and on and on and on. Where if I focus on, I want to quit drinking, this stays the same. There's no reframe, there's no change, the motivation is always the same. Get away from people. Love hurts. Whatever this belief is, it'll manifest in the real world as tangible results. So again, we address the condition, and it seems reasonable to address the condition, and yet if addressing the condition worked, we'd find ourselves individually and societally at a different place, and it just seems to be getting worse over and over and over.
On one of these podcasts, I hope we can get into the collective societal version of this.
Yeah.
Because it sounds to me that what you're saying is that we as a society are acting out the same conundrum that you opened the podcast with. If you ever found yourself doing something negative and realizing it and saying you're not going to do it again, then you did it anyway.
Yes.
And that kind of describes the culture, and the culture going on for decades. So at some point in time, if I could just summarize what I heard you say, from the beginning of the modern approach to dealing with addiction. So let's talk the end of the 19th century forward, last 150 years maybe. The focus has been on the symptom way more than on the cause. And that part of the reason why we're here at a place where there seems to be more addictive behaviors, more substance abuse, in spite of our best intentions. We said we're not going to do it, and yet we're doing more of it, is because we haven't yet agreed to address root causes.
We don't even know have that conversation.
Collective.
Right. We don't even know to have that conversation. We're not at a place where let's sit down and we call it thinking out of the box. And I've been in meetings where, okay, we're going to think out of the box. So we're all in this box throwing stuff out like it's out of the box, but it can't come from any other place than in the box. And my personal experience set me out of the box, which was family, do a good job, be productive, where I was out of the box. But I'm gonna tell you, out of the box is miserable. Out of the box it hurts. Out of the box is scary. And in that hurt, miserable, confused, scary place, something happened to where I shifted something and found myself at a place where I could start working on core issue, and I didn't even know it.
So when and how did that light bulb go on that you became cognizant of the fact that the way out was through identifying and healing core issues, core wounding, core trauma, core whatever? Because until we're cognizant of these things, we can't even focus resources on it. But once we're aware of it, we can now focus. It's something along you can't solve a problem you can't name.
Right. I think that the pivotal point was 9 years into my recovery. I was asked by a partner in a relationship to do something about what she called my anger issue, which was being sarcastic, raising my voice, being mean to her. And I thought, well, I've been telling men for 2 years that there's this group called Man Alive, and they work on violent communication. And I thought, okay, I'll go there. I'll appease her and go there for a little while. And I actually thought that they were going to teach me how to say what I wanted in a nice way so she would do it without an argument. That's what I thought was going to happen. And
a more proficient way to control her.
Yeah, a more nice, kind, loving way.
Right.
And when I went in there and sat down, the facilitator was real clear about the parameters of the group. He said, this group is for violent men. And I just like, what? Oh, okay, yeah. And he said, if you're not violent, then he explained violence. He says, any communication style with somebody you agree to be in a relationship with, which meant my partner at the time, you dismiss, ignore, or redefine her reality. That's emotional violence and coercion. He said, if you, verbal violence is anytime you raise your voice, that's threatening. And I'm just listening to this and I'm going, holy cow. If you call her names, that's objectifying. If you talk to her in a way that diminishes her value, that's diminishing. And then if you lay hands on, that's physical violence. Now he said, if you're a nonviolent man, you've heard all that, and you're not violent, you simply have found yourself in the wrong group. Well, I was glued to my chair. I couldn't get up, and I was in shock at the amount of violence I was culpable of. And then he said, what's standing in your way of you being a nonviolent man is denial, blame, minimizing, and collusion. He said the first step is for you to be accountable for your violence. And what happened to me was I had a feeling flush through my body. And what I understood, and it wasn't, I didn't like I felt it more than I thought it, that this man just gave me the steps to my enlightenment. So I took a deep breath and sat down, and I was there 83 weeks. And at the end of the 83 weeks, I found out how powerful it was for me simply to own the behavior. And in owning the behavior, a feeling came up in me of, and I didn't know how to describe it at first, relief, of openness. What I now understand is compassion for others, because I was feeling internally, so I could recognize that others could feel internally, so I was less likely to hurt them. I felt what it felt like to be hurt and thought, oh my God, this is what they were feeling. They were telling me over and over, that hurts, John, don't do that. And I would not understand what they're talking about. It's like, well, you asked me to tell you this, or you asked me to do this, I did it, now you're mad at me. And I would devastate them. But I didn't know I had no idea what that felt like. In that room, I got, this hurts. I got the impact of my behavior was devastating, not only to them, but to me. And that feeling inspired me to think things like, it is my intent to be kind. I want to be kind. I want to be in peace. I want to be. And when this accountability process came together several years later, when I was working with violent offenders, doing that same class that I was sitting in the jail, I could see it work with them. So it slowly morphed to, let's be accountable. And them all going, no, I was accountable before the judge hit the gavel, hit the table, and I'm spending a year in jail. I don't want to be accountable. And so I redefined the word accountable to simply stating the results, stating the data without blame or judgment. And for me, that was the biggest one, is I'm mean. I'm a violent man. And in that process, I got connected to that emotional body that I thought was something I had to control, which was actually at my service right now. And and things would come to me like, I want to be a loving, caring, nurturing spouse, father, and participant in my community. That popped out of me. It's like, if what are you going to do to make up for all the bad shit you did? And I would have just told you, well, I'm going to make it right. Well, what the hell does that mean? And what does that mean to the people? When I said it is my intent to be a loving, caring, nurturing spouse, father, and participant in my community, that had meaning, that had value, and it came from my emotional part of who I was, not my cognitive part of who I was.
Okay, there's so much that you just
Yeah.
shared in the last 5 to 10 minutes. I want to see if I can go back and um, get some more clarity. So
Okay.
again, if I'm hearing this for the first time, I don't know what I'd be feeling. So I mean, hopefully I'm feeling curiosity, and I'm feeling that same energy that you talked about in your first 12-step meeting. Um, so you said when you were in the Man Alive program, and the instructor basically said that the key to this is, or your conclusion was, the key to change was to own your violence, correct?
Yes.
So could you demystify that? How do you own, how do I own my violence? What does that mean? And, how do I know I've done that?
Um, I think that's like a, I call it serendipitous. Let me give you the answer that just popped up in a moment. I don't know. I don't know. Here's what happened to me. And here's what I create in these talks, in my one-to-ones, and in the group process, is I get people into their feeling body. They don't have to know that they're in their feeling body. When I look at somebody, one of the techniques I use is tell them, number one, I'm not here to change you. I'm not here to get you to stop anything. I'm here to speak to your value, because as you are right now, you're valuable as a human being before you change anything. And there's a feeling that they get when they hear that, um, that makes them curious, and it alerts a radar or focus meter to like at least look at me, and then wonder, and I keep talking. And when they ask me questions, what I know about this particular activating system, subconscious pool of information, when they're curious, the amount of information that can get through that based on the belief system and the conditioning opens a little bit. So now I'll say the same thing, only they'll hear it differently. So if they were back before they had this feeling of, this man just said I was valuable, something I would say would be outside of their point of reference. When they had the feeling you're valuable and they looked at me, this point of reference, or the field of what's important to the point of reference, opened up. So they hear it. It has a way to get into that feeling sensing body, because the mechanism is designed to keep you okay, keep you safe, and its parameters are right here. Somebody says something outside of those parameters, non-essential information. Thank you for sharing. You're a tree huggy, bubblehead facilitator, and I don't have to listen to you. As soon as they feel something, this opens up, and more information gets in and mingles with the paradigm, issue, trauma, and they simply lean forward.
Okay. So I heard you say that the answer to my question was you don't know.
Yeah.
I don't believe you.
Okay.
Because I've had the experience of owning my behavior. And I think what you're talking about here is being willing to say, yes, that's me. That
Mm-hmm.
owning my behavior is merely the agreement. It's simple. It's the agreement that that's true. Because most of my behavior until I got involved in this recovery process was about denial. It was about ignoring. It was about sidestepping. It's what you just said. As long as I had that narrow aperture of validly accepted, approved information to come through, then everything else around it was irrelevant and just was so much bibble babble.
Right.
So owning, which in my understanding is just the verbal assertion that I'm a violent man. And I don't even have to believe that. It's the verb. There's something about stating something factually that has power. And like you said, that aperture of available information started to widen. And there was also, like you said, for me, there was a shift in my body feeling. And that shift was
Yes.
toward something comfortable as opposed to something uncomfortable. And so what I know, based on what you were just sharing, is that when I start to feel something more comfortable, particularly if it's unusual, I want more of it. I'm gonna want to lean into that possibility a little bit more, even if my mind is going, "Don't do this, danger. That guy is a tree-hugging lunatic."
Right.
My body doesn't believe that all of a sudden in that moment. And that's what, for me, the process of owning something that seems uncomfortable involves. It's assenting to a factuality and just for a moment, let the consequences fall where they may.
Yeah. It's the axiom, the truth will set you free. And then the truth I found is my truth. My truth of I'm mean. That's a truth. And the actual mechanism, what I've learned to understand is that when I say I'm mean, it validates that subconscious pool of information as you're doing a good job. And this is a part of it. It's not cognitive, it doesn't make sense. But that validation is an emotional frequency where I say I'm mean, I get this feeling. I get to, oh my God. And then what do I want is the next question I ask myself. Well, I want to be kind. Well, that truth, I'm mean, even though it's the last thing I want to say on the planet, I do not want to admit I'm mean, because in the old paradigm, it meant that there's something wrong with me. I get ostracized now. There's a good reason for me to be ostracized. I'm bad. And the truth is, mean is simply in alignment with the information in my subconscious. As soon as I say mean, this frequency happens and this opening happens and I become lucid. I go, wow. And lucid is not a thought particularly. It's a combination of awareness, feeling, emotion, information, mixed with what I know, which creates this resonance. I want to offer admitting that I'm mean is painful. That's one way to describe I'm mean. And I mean, the picture of what I did to my children, what I did to my partners, what I did to my ex-wife, it's like, oh, it's a realization of the pain I've caused. And then I'm inspired to move to something that is pain-free or relieving. And that's when it came to me. It is my intent to be a loving, caring, nurturing spouse, father, and participant in my community. That came out of this emotional pool, which is also filled with my authentic self and all the things that connect me to my authentic self that I'm not connected to in denial of my feeling and emotion.
So I'd like to follow up on that a little bit more, because what the theme that I hear in what you said, my generalization is that I'm willing to accept that the information in this pool of the subconscious information is accurate, and that there's something alchemically powerful about acceptance.
Yes.
And so to flash forward to the comment you made about when you started doing work in the jails, and you would tell the guys, I'm not here to change you, I'm not here to just stop using or anything like that. And you said that had an impact on the listener. Wasn't that because that was a form of acceptance that you were offering? And
yes.
Wasn't it possible that that was something they'd never heard before?
Absolutely. And they were, and it's confusing because they're in a drug and alcohol program.
Right.
And they got this guy saying, "I'm not here to get you to stop drinking." It's like, well, wait a minute. I thought we were in a drug and alcohol program. That means you tell me that it would be better for me if I didn't drink and use. And that mechanism, when it gets told it's wrong, simply, and I'm not sure how to describe the mechanism where I say it tightens down on the old information. It safeguards. My only relief is having a Miller at the end of work, and you want to take that away from me. It just shuts down, pulls away. See me, and you need to quit drinking. Sees me as the adversary now, and in the context of where they're at, they can't tell me I'm full of shit, so they get a big smile on their face and say, "Oh, thank you, John, you're a good guy." And there's no communication. There's no interchange of information. As soon as I tell them, "I'm not here to change you. I'm not here to tell you that it would be better for if you quit drinking. I'm not against drugs and alcohol, and I'm not against using violence to get what you need. Now, what is it you want, and how can we get that for you in spite of all this stuff?" This is not the issue. You have an authentic self inside. What is it you want? What brings you joy? And let's talk about how you can move to that, and then do whatever you want. If that includes drinking and using, okay. If that includes you see that it's okay for you to be violent, okay. I believe, based on what I've experienced, is that when I touch my authentic self, all these avoidant behaviors and need to use violence to stay away from people simply just fade away. I don't intend for them to go away. I didn't intend to quit drinking when I went to 12 step. I intended to find out how I could get a moment of peace. The result of moment of peace was I wasn't drawn to drink. It's like what you resist persists. If I say no, 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 no to drink, that's what's in my face. If I say I want this, I want this, I want this, the need to drink just simply was not a. It was non-essential information based on this. What I want to live a life of peace. I want to walk in beauty and peace and compassion with an open heart and open mind. That becomes the information I'm looking for, not how to get to my next drink.
So, how did you get to that breakthrough of the importance of the "what do I want" question? Because that seems to me that's, there was a progression of ahas that you had as you went through this.
Right.
So
Yeah.
the man alive aha was that that I have this subconscious way of thinking and believing that I've been resisting. So now if I own it, that brings me some relief and freedom. And then you got the aha of when I'm working with people, I'm no longer there to tell them how to be. I'm telling them I'm accepting them just the way they are, and I have some information I want to share with you if you want it. And so you created an
Right.
environment that's environment of love. It's like, I'm not here to fix
Yeah.
you. I'm just here to be in a relationship with you. So how did, I don't know if what do I want was the next step that you got to, the breakthrough, but could you talk us a little bit how that became, how you understood that was an important question?
Yeah. I want to use, I want to open this up with realization is not an event, it's a process. So my realization that me addressing the behavior that resulted from my misinformed emotional body, reticular activating subconscious pull of information, me addressing the truth in that, there was something happen internally where I was actually put in a, I want to call it lucid place, where the thought that I could ask for something, the recognition that I could ask for something I don't have, was available to me. When I thought I was making choices before, what do I want? Well, I want to be a good dad. I want to be a good worker. I want to provide for my family. Those were all things that were conditioned in me to do. Not that there's anything wrong with those. It's a good aspiration. But when that aspiration becomes your total value, how well you do that speaks to the value that you have. that's empty, because there's no substance in that. That means if I don't go to work for a week, I'm a worthless piece of shit. It's like, so I have to use a lot of energy to maintain that image of what I do is of value to me, rather than coming from the value that I am intrinsically, and then those things becoming aspects, not the end result, not the goal, not the definer of my value. So the defining factor of my value is, well, simply I was born. I was born as a human being, a creative, loving, and Christ talked about it, for you to enter the gates, be as that child. It's like, which is diametrically opposed to my conditioning. To be childlike would be to be foolish and irresponsible and needy and
frivolous.
So frivolous. So just even asking for feeling of value without having to perform some job or work or money or whatever it was that I was providing for everybody seemed completely out of the question, completely back asswards, 180 degrees out. And yet, you know what? If I had started from a value, I may end up doing the same thing, and I do it from a place that is inclusive, seeing my value. I don't have to take anything from anybody else. Everybody has their own value, and each person's value is important to the whole surviving and thriving, and recognizing that we're capable. And what do we want as a society? We got into that society thing. As a group of people, what I want as an individual is to live a life of peace, to walk in beauty, peace, and compassion with an open heart and open mind. Well, if I'm in a group of people, 1,000 people who all have a specific thing that they want, who knows what we can create together? I know what I can create holding this in myself, and then finding the people that were attracted to that, wanted to get into more than just a casual conversation with me. What that has created, I'm excited. I'm excited just to know that who I am is my gift to the people around me. How I perceive, how I delineate, how I take things apart, how I see things, how I contribute in from my frame of reference builds a strong family unit and community. Wow.
All right, so you got maybe you can tell us a little bit about how is it that you got into the jails and began to do this work. And I'm assuming that, based on what I'm hearing you say, that part of the gift of that ministry or that profession, whatever word you want to use, was that you got to try different things till you could hone them to a process that yielded results. Is that accurate?
Yeah. How I got into the jails in 1995, before I went to my class of right now I call it cooperative communication class. When I went into it, the term was batterers re-education. It's like, holy shit, who wants to be? I don't want to go to that class. That's for all those guys. And we changed it into violence intervention program, and that's the term I mostly use. And what I know it to be is simply identifying my style of communication, which is violent, emotional, verbal, and physical, and shift into a style of communication that is cooperative without the coercion, and how to maintain a balance. And I think in 12 steps we call it this interdependent relationship, where we know that we're dependent on each other, but it's not codependent, or counterdependent. It's interdependent, where we create this relationship, this unit that supports us both.
Right, because so, it's based on voluntary mutuality.
Yes, and value.
Right.
So I went to this. I started volunteering in Folsom Prison with a group called Alternatives to Violence Project, doing 4-day conflict resolution workshops. So when I went to my violence intervention class, I told the guy that I had already been volunteering in Folsom Prison, so I was familiar with the institution. As I was going through the 82 weeks of learning to stop my physical, verbal, and emotional violence, I picked it up really well. And I was used to talking in a group. So I spoke with some confidence. And about 60 weeks into it, this man got a contract with Sacramento County to do the violence intervention programs inside the jail. And he asked me if I wanted the job. And my first thought when he asked me, there was a big no screamed off in my head. It was like, hell no. And I heard coming out of my mouth, okay. And then that's how I got started in the jails. And he took me in, gave me a couple, actually he went in there with me one time, showed me how the group was processed. And I was familiar with the logistics of the group, the basic material, intermediate material. And I just started doing groups. And I did that for, this is significant. I did that for a year and a half. I had a day job, so I was doing about 3 nights a week. And what I got was the way he had that set up, the violence intervention class, was regimented. You checked in, you were accountable, you did this, we went to the basic material, and then we did something for a check. Oh, we made an agreement not to be violent next week. So that's the way he wanted the class to run. Well, in facilitating the class, I found myself opening up to my own experience, learning a different way to say it, and he wanted me to say the same way every time. This is how you, and it's effective. Don't get me wrong, it's effective. It was effective for him. It's not what I wanted to do. I didn't feel comfortable doing it. And one day I asked the guys, as a violence intervention program facilitator, I asked them. I said, "What are you hearing us say?" Because I was curious. Because I was like all excited about telling them how to stay out of jail, and they were all there goofing off, throwing. They don't throw spit wads. They colluding, talking.
If only.
If only. And I asked them, I said, "What are you hearing us say?" So one of the gentlemen in the back room raised his hand. I said, "Okay, what are you hearing us say?" He said, "John, you want us all to be a bunch of sissies." And it clicked. They're not hearing what I'm saying. I know I have a good picture of what I'm saying. And I'm like excited about what I'm telling them according to my picture. By the time he gets to them, they've turned it in. You want me to be a damn sissy? You want me to be a weak ass guy? I'm not going to do that. So I actually quit. I told my boss that I'm not able to follow your guidelines because I want to branch out into talking to them a little bit about what they're hearing and saying. I knew that he was paying me to do his program, which is reasonable. So I quit. When I quit, the people that hired him gave me an exit interview. Why are you quitting? And I told them, I explained to them, they're not hearing it. It's a good program, don't get me wrong. It saved a lot of people. It saved a lot of families. It does good work, as the 12 steps does for addiction and behaviors. And there was more, and I wanted to be part of that more instead of being stuck in this regimen. So they offered me a contract to come in and process. And in that group, I started that in 2003, and I did it till 2015. I put together all this, what I call intentional living, basic material. The 4 constants of relationship: focus, attention, today, own your projections, move towards your pain, and today I intend to, and then the accountability process. And I saw that people who went through my group, along with the whole program, it cut the recidivism, I want to say, in half. It went from 70 to 38%. And that is still not good. Don't get me wrong. It's a lot better than 75% people that go to jail, go back to jail. They recidivize. After going through our program and my class specifically, that was cut in half. And what I simply asked them to do is just say the truth. And I would use the term I would give them 5 words: arrogant, entitled, mean, controlling, and needy. Which one are you? And they would own one of those, and they would take it to the accountability process. Truth, I'm arrogant. Take a breath. And they would take a breath. And something would happen internally in them. They would have this lucid moment of, oh my God, I really am. It's like they get out of the denial place, because it's a safe place just to say the truth, because I'm not blaming them. Everybody else in the group, that's the process we're going through. We're learning. So in this safety net inside the classroom, they say, I'm arrogant. Oh, I, how do I be kind? And then I'd say, well, create the intent. And they go, what do you mean? I said, I intend to be kind. And they go, I intend to be kind. And then they say, well, what do I do now? And I said, well, don't do anything, because what you do is arrogant. Let this work inside you. Let this work inside you, because I knew that the reframe of the source information would automatically produce a different behavior without their cognitive awareness, without their realization, without them trying to be better. And then they could see, oh my God, John, you should have been at the dorm when so-and-so said something. And I just went, oh, it's okay if that's what you think. And I moved on. Otherwise, I would have knocked that guy out. So I started seeing the results of these guys reporting back to me. That was profound. And I just put it together because I saw the value of it. And it, like I said, in retrospect, it came out of 5-6 years of dialogue practice, being in the group. I was doing 6 to 10 groups a week for that whole 13 years. So I had plenty of time to practice, and it was effective. So
that's an amazing story. I'm really grateful that you spent some time sharing that. And our time is up, believe it or not.
oh
So
wow,
what I'd like to
that's
do maybe next week is let's dig into the actual process. You mentioned 4 constants. Let's talk about what that is. Let's demystify that. Let's help a person hearing this for the new time get acquainted with the different elements of this accountability process. Because we also have the barriers that we can talk about. So if that's okay with you, let's leave it there, and we'll just set the intention to dig into this actual process, particularly if we can share some examples from maybe your work in the jails, or I'm happy to share my own personal experience in going through the process, and
yeah.
continue to
That's,
demystify
that's
accountability. So thank
cool.
you as always,
Yeah,
John. Thank you for your
you're
time
welcome,
and your
Marty.
wisdom and your passion. And I look forward to doing more of this next week.
You got it, Marty. Thank you too.
Take care.
Okay.